Welcome to The Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're plunging headfirst into a global issue that, well, feels like it's constantly shifting beneath our feet. The escalating conflict between Israel and Iran.
It really does.
And this isn't just about, conventional military clashes. It's a truly multifaceted engagement spanning everything from audacious direct strikes to the shadowy world of cyber warfare and even economic tremors that ripple across your daily life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our mission today is really to peel back the layers on this recent surge in tensions. We want to help you truly grasp the core motivations driving both sides, analyze the significant legal and economic implications, and maybe cast our gaze forward to potential future scenarios. And as always, we're drawing from a meticulously curated stack of insightful analyses and reports, think tanks like the Wilson Center and the Middle East Institute, news powerhouses like Forbes and CBS News, and cybersecurity experts like Radware. So let's dive in.
Absolutely. And, what began in many ways as maybe a focused effort to halt Iran's nuclear program has significantly broadened its scope. It's really transformed into a complex campaign impacting Iran's security, its economic infrastructure, and even its political stability.
Right.
This isn't just a discussion about bombs and missiles, like you said. It's truly a deep dive into the bites and narratives that are shaping this modern interconnected conflict.
Okay, so to truly understand this powder keg, we probably have to rewind just a bit to the immediate triggers. Events so brazen, they arguably redefined the rules of engagement. What were those key moments, late July and early August of 2024, and then again in June 2025, that truly kicked this into a higher gear?
Yeah, those are critical.
We're talking about the assassinations of Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran on July 31st, 2024, and Hezbollah's military chief Fuad Shukur in Beirut, both widely attributed to Israel.
Well, these strikes, particularly Haniyeh's killing on Iranian soil during the new Iranian president's inauguration, were indeed audacious. Our sources definitely highlight them as a clear signal of Israel's deeper strategic calculus.
Okay.
What's crucial here, I think, is that Israel perceives this as an existential fight against Iran and its vast network of proxies. Think Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis.
Right.
From Israel's perspective, this isn't some new development. It's the culmination of a 20-year Iranian campaign designed to undermine state sovereignty across the region, build up their power, and ultimately destroy Israel.
That's a stark framing and an existential fight. So if that's the perception, what does that mean for Israel's approach? You mentioned escalate to de-escalate. That sounds, incredibly risky. What do the sources say about that strategy, and what are the potential downsides?
It is a bold, high-stakes approach, and our sources refer to it as Israel's escalate to de-escalate mode. The belief seems to be that by demonstrating their undeniable capabilities and their willingness to act decisively, even, at times, defying Washington's caution, they can force Iran into a negotiated outcome that is advantageous to Israel.
Okay.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's stated objective is deeply rooted in preventing another October 7th incident. He views this fight as being against the murderous Islamic regime, making sure to distinguish it from the Iranian people themselves.
I see.
The risk, of course, is miscalculation, that it doesn't de-escalate but actually spirals into a wider conflict.
Yeah.
That's the tightrope they're walking.
Yeah, a very dangerous tightrope. And central to this entire conflict, the core fear driving so much of Israel's actions is the nuclear dimension. Their primary objective, maybe above all else, is to halt Iran's nuclear program. But our sources, like the IAEA Director General's statement back in April 2025, they paint a concerning picture. He said Iran is not far from having a nuclear weapon, a matter of months, not years. How does that kind of rapid timeline impact the strategic calculus for both sides?
Well, that statement from the IAEA Director General significantly ratchets up the tension, obviously, shortens the theoretical breakout time to a point that many nations, especially Israel, find, intolerable.
Right.
And this brings us to a really compelling angle the sources explore: the legality of Israel's actions under international law. Specifically, Article 51 of the UN Charter. That's essentially the UN's core rule on self-defense.
Okay.
They delve into the concept of preemptive or anticipatory self-defense. The traditional understanding of imminence used to mean an attack was happening right now. But our sources show an evolving, more contextual approach. Now, it considers the gravity of the threatened attack, especially if it involves weapons of mass destruction, and the argument of a last window of opportunity to avert catastrophic harm. It's a complex legal tightrope, to say the least.
And within that incredibly complex legal framework, the targeting of nuclear scientists becomes a particularly controversial point. How do the sources justify or explain this, given the international norms around, civilian targeting?
Yeah, it's a contentious area for sure. The analysis suggests that if these scientists are part of Iran's armed forces, then international law generally considers their targeting lawful.
Okay.
However, for those who retain civilian status, it kind of hinges on direct participation in hostilities, or DPH.
DPH.
Yeah. The argument made, and it's a critical one in these sources, is that nuclear scientists with non-fungible expertise, meaning their skills are uniquely critical and not easily replaced, sort of like a specialized surgeon whose unique knowledge is indispensable for a critical operation.
Right, irreplaceable.
Exactly. If they directly contribute to nuclear weapons development, they can indeed be considered lawful targets. It's really about their functional role in a hostile program, rather than just their formal title.
Fascinating, albeit maybe unsettling, to consider that level of legal nuance in modern conflict.
Yeah.
Now let's shift our focus to Iran, because Haniyeh's assassination on its own soil was undoubtedly, an unmitigated embarrassment for the Islamic Republic.
Definitely.
It immediately raised serious questions about Iran's security and intelligence capabilities, both domestically and internationally. So how are they expected to respond to such a significant blow?
Indeed, it was a profound blow to their prestige. And while Iran's rhetoric promises harsh punishment and vengeance from the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the IRGC Revolutionary Guards, the sources generally suggest that the likely path for Iran is something like strategic endurance.
Strategic endurance.
Yeah. This isn't about direct, large-scale military confrontation. It means absorbing the blows, preserving their core regime structures, and adapting to regroup, much like we saw with regimes like, say, post-1991 Iraq or post-2012 Syria. It's a long game for them.
So, if direct military confrontation is unlikely, how does Iran continue to exert influence and resist pressure? What are these asymmetric capabilities you mentioned earlier?
They rely heavily on these asymmetric capabilities. This involves leveraging their global and regional covert networks, particularly the IRGC Quads Force, that's Iran's elite overseas operations arm,
Right, the Quads Force.
and various proxy militias like Hezbollah.
Right.
These networks enable continued resistance, including proxy attacks on Israeli, U.S., or allied interests, and targeted assassinations.
Oh, okay.
It allows them to respond, but without necessarily crossing a threshold that would invite massive retaliation. It's about inflicting pain and maintaining pressure through, deniable actions.
And as we move into the 21st century, the conflict isn't just on land or in the air, but very much in the digital fog of war. Cyber warfare plays an increasingly significant role here.
Huge role.
Israel, for instance, possesses a formidable offensive cyber capability, famously exemplified by, the Stuxnet virus.
Yeah, Stuxnet.
More recently, we've seen high-impact cyber strikes by this group, Ganjeshka Durande, also known as Predatory Sparrow, on Iranian financial infrastructure. They reportedly destroyed data at Bank SIPA and even stole a substantial $81.7 million in digital assets from the Nobitex cryptocurrency exchange. That's a powerful demonstration of intent.
Absolutely. And Iran has responded aggressively in the cyber domain, though often with maybe a primary focus on psychological effects and disinformation rather than direct destructive attacks.
Interesting.
For instance, we've seen fake emergency text messages spoofing Israel's home front command, designed specifically to sow panic with false reports of, say, fuel shortages or imminent terror attacks.
Wow.
They also make extensive use of social media botnets and even AI-generated media like deepfake newscasts to control narratives both domestically and internationally. And at the same time, they've imposed internal internet controls, often framed as measures to maintain stability against alleged Israeli cyber attacks, but which also serve to control their own population.
So it's not just about stealing data or shutting down systems. It's really about sowing chaos and controlling public perception. And beyond the state actors, what about hacktivism in this conflict?
Precisely. It's about shaping the battlefield of information. And on the hacktivism front, what truly stands out is the sheer volume of activity. Our sources report a surge of nearly 100 groups involved, with over 60 of them predominantly pro-Iran, engaging in distributed denial of service or DDoS attacks.
DDoS, right.
Which basically just flood a system to shut it down.
Yeah.
Top groups like Mr. Hamza and Arabian Ghosts have specifically targeted critical Israeli industries, government and public sector, manufacturing, telecommunications, media and internet, and banking financial services.
Yeah.
But the real revelation here, I think, is a global spillover. These coordinated hacktivist campaigns have also targeted the United States, the United Kingdom, and Jordan. So, what starts as a regional conflict quickly finds its way into the digital infrastructure of countries far removed from the immediate theater.
It's a stark reminder of how interconnected our digital lives really are. Okay, now, let's pivot to diplomacy. Some sources describe the recent efforts as diplomacy's last shot. We saw that Geneva meeting on June 20th, 2025, involving Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi and his European counterparts. What were the challenges there, and what were the key takeaways from those discussions?
Well, the challenges for diplomacy are immense, almost insurmountable, according to the sources. While U.S. and European officials are urging restraint and trying desperately to keep diplomacy alive, Iran has clearly stated that its defense capabilities are not negotiable.
Not negotiable, okay.
There's also a long-standing U.S. offer on the table for Iran to have a civilian nuclear program if it agrees not to enrich uranium on its own soil, opting instead to purchase enriched fuel from other countries. But our sources note that Iran has not substantively engaged with this offer in any, meaningful way.
So essentially a diplomatic brick wall. And how does the broader geopolitical landscape, say, President Trump's stance, factor into this diplomatic deadlock?
It certainly complicates matters. President Trump has expressed significant frustration with Iran's perceived lack of genuine negotiation. And regionally, there's considerable speculation about the true degree of U.S.-Israel coordination in these strikes, despite U.S. denials of prior knowledge.
Right.
This uncertainty itself further muddies the waters, making any diplomatic breakthroughs incredibly difficult because, trust is at an all-time low.
And connecting this global tension directly to your wallet, the economic fallout has been immediate and palpable. The conflict has had a direct and significant effect on oil prices.
Oh, yeah.
Brent crude futures, for instance, hit a 6-month high of $74 per barrel by June 19th, 2025, climbing over 4% in a single day due to the ongoing conflict. Why does this matter so much to the average person beyond just the price at the pump?
This is a crucial point for everyone listening, really. When oil prices surge, it's not just your gas tank. Our sources really dig into the often overlooked ripple effect. Think of it as a kind of silent global inflation tax on virtually every single product you buy.
Yeah, tax, yeah.
From your morning coffee to your new smartphone, because the cost of moving everything just went up.
Yeah.
Oil remains the lifeblood of global commerce, and there are significant concerns about potential disruptions to oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a critical conduit for, 1/3 of the world's seaborne oil?
A third?
But we've also seen Iran's oil exports drop dramatically from a weekly average of 1.7 million barrels per day down to just 102,000 barrels per day. The key insight, this isn't just about consumer wallets. It tightens the screws on businesses too, forcing tough choices on investment and hiring, acting as a global economic drag.
That's a powerful way to frame it, a global inflation tax. So, looking beyond the immediate conflict, what are the potential future scenarios for the Iranian regime itself? What does this strategic endurance look like long-term, and are there other possibilities?
Well, the strategic endurance scenario is indeed considered most likely, where Iran absorbs military blows but focuses relentlessly on preserving its core structures and regrouping.
Okay.
This is sharply contrasted with a direct, all-out escalation, which is deemed unlikely because it would almost certainly trigger massive U.S. involvement and lead to the rapid destruction of the regime.
Right.
But there are other possibilities mentioned. One is regime mutation, which would involve an internal transformation within Iran's elite, leading to new, perhaps more moderate leadership. This can be driven by internal pressures or maybe a generational shift.
Interesting.
And finally, maybe a muted endgame, where a de facto ceasefire occurs after Iran's nuclear and missile capacities are significantly hollowed out, leaving Israel and the U.S. with a strategic upper hand, but without a full regime collapse.
That brings us to an audacious question that many are asking, even discussing in official circles. What would actually happen if Israel were to target Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei? Prime Minister Netanyahu has publicly stated he wouldn't rule it out, even comparing Khamenei to Saddam Hussein. What do the sources say about the potential outcomes of such a, drastic move?
The sources offer varied and often conflicting perspectives on this. On one hand, Khamenei is old and reportedly in poor health. And Iran's clerical regime actually has an established process for succession through the Assembly of Experts, which functions much like the Vatican's College of Cardinals.
The Cardinals, okay.
Yeah. This implies the system is not solely dependent on one man and some generals, and is, in theory, prepared for the eventual death of a supreme leader. The idea is that the institution is stronger than the individual.
Oh.
However, there's a very strong counter-argument presented by other sources. They suggest that assassinating Khamenei would be an outright declaration of war and a guarantee of regional war.
Yeah.
It could even lead to a more radical successor, much like Yahya Sinwar succeeded Haniyeh as a more hardline figure, and potentially result in a significant loss of international support for Israel.
That's a huge...
It is. And what's often overlooked in these discussions, and a critical insight from some analyses, is the perspective that internal tensions and grievances within Iran, rather than external actions, are ultimately more likely to cause regime change. External pressure often just unifies factions against a common enemy.
Right, it can backfire. So what does this all mean for you, our listener? Understanding these complex dynamics isn't just for geopolitical analysts or policymakers. It's crucial for recognizing how events, even those far away in the Middle East, can directly impact your daily life.
Definitely.
From the price you pay at the gas pump to the security of the digital landscape you navigate every single day.
And maybe for a final provocative thought, in an increasingly interconnected world where conflicts are fought with bytes and narratives just as much as with bombs and missiles, how do nations truly balance the imperative of self-defense with the profound risk of unprecedented global spillover? And what role can genuine diplomacy truly play when, for some, the stakes feel nothing short of existential?
Powerful questions for us all to consider. We encourage you to continue your own deep dives into these complex issues, armed with the context and insights we've shared today. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.